Hey, just imagine you are the CEO of multi-billion-dollar company and your company is on its peak success. So what are the mistakes that you should avoid that can lead your company to bankruptcy? Don't worry, you will learn till the video ends. Welcome to another Bizztalk case study. This story is about Blockbuster, a multi-billion-dollar company that flopped in its sequel and went bankrupt. Well, our story begins in 1985 in Dallas, Texas, by a guy named David Cook. Cook had an experience in databases, and he did a job of designing some early analysis tool where they would determine what video they're gonna put in, what location. It was pretty sharp thinking way back in 1985. Blockbuster attracted the attention of a guy named Wayne Huizenga. Huizenga thought it would be so cool to have a franchise of Blockbuster. And that time Wayne bought the whole company and he paid $18.5 million for it. With Wayne good execution, they had 2,800 stores and it took them 5 years. And they were like a freight train, unstoppable. They were so popular that Viacom, the big media company, has paid $8.4 billion for Blockbuster in 1994. Their plan was interesting. Blockbuster had $1.25 billion in the bank and they bought Blockbuster for a stock swap, where Viacom gave Blockbuster their stock worth $8.4 billion and they bought the company with all that money in the account. Do you know what they were going to do? They were going to buy Paramount Studios, the company that gave hits like Titanic, Iron Man, Mission Impossible, etc. etc. Well, they played very smart. But that was in 1994. 3 years later, in Silicon Valley, California, a guy named Reed Hastings was really pissed off because Blockbuster charged him $40 because he was late returning Apollo 13. He was very annoyed and he created a company called Netflix. And Netflix took an advantage of the fact that videotape were heavy but DVD were really light. The other thing Netflix did is that they invested in technology and they started saying, quote, if we mail them to people, they are not going to like the store to browse. And we can have a selection on the website.
There's a better way to rent movies. As many as you want for just $20 a month and no late fees. Go to Netflix.com, make a list of the movies you want to see, and in about one business day, you'll get 3 DVDs. Keep them as long as you want, without late fees. Then when you're done, look, prepaid envelopes. Return one, and they'll send you another movie from your list. It's easy.
Netflix. All the movies you want, $20 a month, and no late fees.
And better yet, instead of charging them per DVD rental, they made monthly subscription, where you could rent up to this many DVDs per month and let them rent something they think is interesting based on what they have already rented. Well, guess what? Netflix took off. In 1999, Viacom sent Blockbuster public and had an IPO. And in 2002, there was another IPO that belonged to Netflix.
And today, with quarterly revenues of $21 million, Netflix Incorporated went public at an $82.5 million valuation.
That an IPO is like high school graduation. It's big at the time, but with hindsight, it's only really a beginning of something else.
Blockbuster was on the stock market and their value was $2.6 billion. In the year 2000, shortly after the IPO, Blockbuster were talking about their high revenues and they were talking about how many videos people would rent. But they slipped in this little fact that they made $800 million on late fees. They were making money on late fees. To us, that means there were $800 million worth of annoyed customer that maybe return it a day or a week late. But Blockbuster was still moving along, and in 2004, Blockbuster would be at its peak with 9,000 stores globally in America. Internet was doing a lot of things, and Blockbuster with a competitor out there is still leasing, renting, and buying new locations. That means they had 9,000 payments for real estates and 9,000 locations that needed employees. Well, at that time, they're worth nearly $5 billion, and that would be the peak for the Blockbuster. In 2004, Blockbuster announced a mailing service to mail out DVDs and to mail rentals to the Americans. Blockbuster was too late to adapt the market, and soon Blockbuster find out that the financial results were not there and they were not doing so well. And Netflix recovered and kept pumping along. And soon Blockbuster basically become convenience stores. They had a Coke and a candy, all these stuffs. And you could rent video games also. They are starting to have an issues and troubles. And guess what? Blockbuster heads to the place where bad sequels go to land. Blockbuster had all the money in the bank, all that resources, and they were owned by Viacom, a giant media company that time. And yet, they fumbled the opportunity because of legacy thinking. Let's take a look what they had. The first thing they had, they were owned by Viacom, and they had access to the content. The second thing, they had money. At one point, they had $1.2 billion in the bank. They saw a competitor emerge. They just didn't react fast enough, and their legacy thinking was tied to their legacy business model. Netflix was founded in 1997, and they gave Netflix a head start of 7 years before they introduced a mail-out system in 2004. Well, there is a funny side story that Netflix actually approached to Blockbuster for a buyout deal of $50 million. And they said, hey, you got all these movies, why don't we offer a mail service as an additional feature? They were laughed out of the office and think it was a terrible idea, like no one would pay subscription for movie rentals. Blockbuster missed the cues in the market, including one that was sitting in their conference room, offering to partner with them. And finally, the Blockbuster sequel just flopped, and they filed bankruptcy in 2010. So why they failed? First, Blockbuster hated the change. Don't get me wrong. They loved their business model, but they believed it in so much that they were unable to see the opportunities as they arose. Blockbuster were making a lot of money while Netflix was just beginning its DVD by mail service, and later its streaming online services, while Blockbuster was still earning billions of dollars in revenue using its current business model. Additionally, the margins and the market for these new offerings did not appear as attractive as its established model. Why even pay attention to these new ideas if the market are small and margins are slim? Blockbuster was continue focusing on their profit earnings, while Netflix pursue a new business model with either DVD by mail or streaming online service. It doesn't matter whether your competitor markets are small and have slim margin. Never ignore them. Competitors are always competitor. It's your responsibility to do something better and different from them. Otherwise, they will take your market. Brand strength and past success are not enough to compete against new digital transformation. And the last, but not least, embrace the change. In the current economy, technology is going to transform everything. In the new tech economy, the only constant that we can really depend is on change. I hope you have got how really important to change with time in business and always in a state to learn and adapt new technology. Well, did you remember I said within 2 years Blockbuster was sold for $18.5 million? Well, in next episode we will see how Groupon rejected $6 billion offering from Google